Hey there, YouTubers. I'm going to take a stab at talking philosophy. Richard Rorty here on the screen. I've been watching a couple hours, or listening more than watching, to him talk on talk radio um, as recently as post 9/11. He was a professor at Stanford at the time. I had him as my teacher, professor, and thesis advisor at Princeton University, where I was an undergrad from 76 to 1980. And I really got a lot out of him in terms of his lectures. My decision to go into philosophy as opposed to, say, international relations might have had a lot to do actually with also discovering Wittgenstein, another thinker that Rorty appreciates. Although Rorty is mostly known for, well, for two things. In the American tradition, he's known for his studying of John Dewey and William James, especially the so called American pragmatists. He's a little more dismissive of Peirce. And he's also known for spending a lot of time reading continental so called philosophy, by which he means European, and the more narrative kind of philosophical tradition there, which was more the history of thought, the history of civilization as taught in Europe, whereas in the Anglo tradition, philosophy became much more technical, as he puts it. After Bertrand Russell, but let's give Frege credit as well, the whole idea of symbolic logic, propositional calculus. Now, I think of those efforts as feeding the computer science of the future. In other words, when we dive into something like that, the precessional effects, as Fuller would call them, in other words, the side effects, end up being more important than whatever the original intent was in a lot of cases. You could call that drift, I suppose, or you could call that teleology, perhaps. And that's the topic I want to mention here, teleology or telos. I think Fuller, since I always talk about Fuller, how would we fit him in? Was he an American pragmatist? What was his philosophy vis-a-vis, say, Rorty's? Rorty doesn't often talk about Bucky Fuller that I've been able to find. And nor does philosophy in general, academic philosophy, currently admit much about Fuller into the discourse, except I'm seeing change of that in Europe, in the continent. So we'll probably find more Bucky Fuller on talk radio in Europe than here in the U.S. I want to say talk radio is important to me. I used to live overseas, and when I'd come back to the homeland, so to speak, I would like to listen to talk radio. There was no internet yet, and just the idea of people calling in and having Q&A and so on, just from anywhere, moderated discussion. I liked that. I thought that's really in the spirit of democracy. And I think Rorty, he's really wanting to just have transparency and democracy, representative democracy. He thinks that modern liberalism, what he calls bourgeois liberalism, he's not defensive about it. He thinks that is so far the best solution that humans have come up with in terms of lifestyle. And he has no problem saying that and, wanting to advocate for that, but sort of without any appeals to any metaphysical authorities or God's will or anything of that. He just justifies his thinking. He thinks justification is enough overall, as opposed to appeals to absolute truth and so on. This is me synthesizing some of what I was just listening to on the radio. I'm giving you a thumbnail. You can go back to those YouTubes and see if you think I got it right. Of course, I can't do 2 hours and 3 minutes, but that's kind of the idea. Now, Fuller, I think, and I would like to see more talk of this in connection with Heidegger as well, because Heidegger talks explicitly a lot about technology and what do we mean by technology and what does technology mean to us. Now, this quote by Fuller is something important, I think, in terms of his different usage of the term, also metaphysical, he used differently. Let's start with technology. In its complexities of design integrity, the universe is technology. The technology evolved by man is thus far amateurish compared to the elegance of non-humanly contrived regeneration. Man does not spontaneously recognize technology other than his own, so he speaks of the rest as something he ignorantly calls nature. So Fuller is looking at ants and termites and these like amazing life forms that just create these amazing, I'll call them civilizations for the sake of analogy. They're very highly ordered. There's division of labor. There's, all kinds of stuff going on. And then you look at the humans and you wonder, is there something driving us as well to fulfill some kind of destiny that we don't know? Just like the seed of a tree, or really just yourself as a body, when you're born, you grow. It's not out of any conscious plan that you have necessarily. You look around you and you see what's going to happen. Oh, I'm going to get older and taller and I'm going to die. So I see that by example, but we don't have other human planets to look at. We don't get to see what humans have done in other solar systems, just assuming there were such a thing. If the ones that appeared successful all followed a certain path, that would tell us something. But we don't have any kind of feedback like that. But it's not really out of the question, right? That there is some kind of manifestation that if we stick around, if we manage to not blow ourselves up, that we will manifest certain patterns that are really kind of in our nature to do. We just haven't gotten there yet. But with the electrical grids, maybe we were always going to do that if we stuck around long enough, create electrical grids. And that would come with greater mastery of natural principles, nature's technology. And this is how he uses the word metaphysical. In other words, as we become more competent in terms of understanding the principles of nature, we do more with less. He always gives this example. For instance, a communication satellite weighing only 1/4 of a ton is now outperforming the transoceanic communication capabilities of 175,000 tons of copper cable. So put that way, the more with less thing is what gives him the confidence to assert that there is now plenty for all. Again, quoting, war is obsolete. It is imperative that we get the word out to all humanity, rush, before someone ignorantly pushes the button that provokes pushing of all the buttons. So I think in terms of American pragmatism, I'll say two things before I conclude. I think, yes, he's in favor of a democratic process because he sees, like Whitehead did, that civilization is in the direction of giving individuals greater freedoms. More freedom, and this is where he would connect to Rorty, is a good thing and worth striving for. And if we aim in that direction, we will accomplish what the telos, if there is such a thing, is aiming to accomplish. Again, I think behind Fuller's writing is the sense that humans aren't really in charge of everything about themselves either. Like, we don't grow our own fingernails, we don't grow our own hair. It just happens. It seems to be automatic. So in terms of our most intimate bodily functions, we are somewhat epiphenomenal in terms of our thinking. We kind of coast along in terms of our thinking atop a vast technology, not of our ego design. Like, we don't have factories to make ourselves, and we wouldn't know how at this point. We have no clue. Talk about brains and so on. We pretend that we're maybe close to some breakthroughs there, but I'm not really convinced that we are. So could it be that the human species has lurking potentials that we consciously have no awareness of? And I think Nietzsche and those who talk about the overman or just a next stage, Gurdjieff even, that humans are on an evolutionary path and that psychologically we're not finished in our evolution. even if physically we don't change that much, that we have a long way to go psychologically, and that might be accelerating thanks to technology again. I think that's a thesis I'd like to run by the pragmatists and ask them, is this something you have room for in your worldview? Because in addition to such concepts comes another approach towards politics. Fuller advocated the design science revolution as an alternative to politics. I don't think Rorty really conceives of there being such a thing as an alternative to politics. And I agree that it's worthy of skepticism. What are we talking about there? So if I were on talk radio, or if I were organizing more conversation around where Fuller fits in, these are the kinds of questions that I would be bringing up. Finally, I just wanted to again remind you that we're working at this gallery downtown. I have this um, project that's not mine. I'm working on a project with the Grand Master of Flextegrity, Sam Lanahan. He's in charge, and I'm a minion or an apprentice, and he treats us well. We being whoever Glenn works on this with me, whoever's working on this, it's more than one person can do. So Sam is managing a big operation in terms of getting a gallery together in time for an opening in a couple weeks, right? There's a lot to do there. So October 3rd is the grand opening, and I've got pictures of our work in progress in my gallery. I'll put a link to the Flickr album in this towards the end of this YouTube. So thanks a lot for listening, and we'll talk to you later.